Welcome to The Explainer. We're diving into a story today that honestly feels like it's been ripped straight from a blockbuster movie. We're talking about the capture of a former dictator and the absolutely intense, high-stakes debate that has just exploded across the political world because of it. So it all kicks off with this one single dramatic fact. The former dictator of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, has been captured. Not only that, he's been brought to New York City and is now in the custody of the DEA. As you can imagine, this one event has set off a massive chain reaction of legal questions and political fireworks.
Okay, so how in the world did we get here and what happens now? Well, here's our game plan. First, we'll break down the capture itself. Then we're going to look at the legal tightrope the U.S. is walking here. From there, we dive headfirst into the explosive political debate. What was the real reason for this? That's going to lead us straight to the ghost of nation building that's haunting this entire thing. And finally, we'll tackle the huge, critical questions about Venezuela's future that, right now, nobody seems to have an answer for.
All right, first up, a dictator in custody. Before we get tangled up in the why, let's just lock down the what. How exactly did this all go down?
Panelists on Fox News were calling the mission a flawless operation carried out by the U.S. military. And the result? This unbelievable video of Maduro arriving in New York. You have to understand, this was a moment celebrated by the Venezuelan diaspora all over the world. For them, it was the fall of a tyrant.
Okay, so on to our second section, the legal justification. You've got a former head of state in U.S. custody. The first question everyone's asking is, wait, can they even do that? Is this actually allowed?
Well, according to law professor Jonathan Turley, the answer is a pretty firm yes. He says there's an iron-plated legal precedent for this, and it goes all the way back to the 1989 capture of Panama's dictator Manuel Noriega. Turley says the key here is how the U.S. framed this. By making sure DEA agents were part of the extraction, it wasn't just a military move, it was officially a law enforcement action to bring an indicted criminal to justice.
And Turley takes it even a step further. He argues this whole thing falls under the president's very broad Article 2 powers. Basically, the Constitution gives the president a ton of latitude when it comes to foreign policy, and that can include really controversial stuff like regime change. Because of that, he thinks a direct legal challenge to the operation itself, it's probably not going to go anywhere in court.
All right, Section 3, debating the motive. So even if the action was legal, was it right? This is where the whole thing shifts from the courtroom to the political arena, and boy, do things get heated. The central question becomes, what was the real reason this happened right now? So, on one side, you've got Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who immediately called out the official story. She's basically saying the whole drugs thing is just a cover. She thinks the real motivations here are about getting access to Venezuelan oil and creating a convenient distraction from other political problems at home.
The pushback to that was, well, it was swift and it was sharp. Panelist Guy Benson called her take a pitiful response. He completely reframed the conversation, saying this isn't about oil or politics. It's about Maduro being an illegitimate dictator who brutalized his own people. From his perspective, this action is a liberation for Venezuelans, and that makes the motive almost secondary to the outcome.
And that's really the crucial point, right? You have this fundamental split, two completely different ways of seeing the same event. Was it a legitimate law enforcement action against a known narco-trafficker, one that was backed by a bounty from a previous administration? Or was it a politically motivated chess move to grab resources, change a foreign government, and get everyone to look away from problems at home?
Now for Section 4, echoes of nation building. This fight over the motive, it really quickly spiraled into a much bigger fear, one that carries the heavy weight of recent American history. All of a sudden, people across the entire political spectrum started asking the same nervous question. Wait a minute, are we watching the beginning of Iraq or Afghanistan all over again? The fear is that this one capture isn't the end of the story, but actually the first step down a very long, very familiar, and very costly road.
And this is where you see this rare moment of unity. These nation-building concerns, they cut right across party lines. Let's be honest, the American public has very little appetite for another foreign intervention with no clear exit strategy. That whole you brick it, you buy it problem feels very real, and hearing phrases like the oil will pay for it just triggers major alarm bells for anyone who remembers the last couple of decades.
Which brings us to our final section, unanswered questions. The military operation might be over, but its success has basically opened a Pandora's box of incredibly complex and vital questions about the future of an entire country.
I mean, this really gets to the heart of the challenge ahead. Just look at these questions. They are not minor details. They're practical. They're incredibly difficult. And right now, they have not been answered. Who exactly takes charge now? How do you make sure the transition is stable? And yeah, if oil is part of this whole picture, who rebuilds the infrastructure? And this is the big one. Who gets the money?
Jonathan Turley brings up one final, really fascinating point. He suggests that regime change is actually an unavoidable consequence of the legal action itself. Think about it. The indictment wasn't just against Maduro the person. It targeted his entire network, his lieutenants. It described the whole regime as a criminal enterprise. So by simply prosecuting that case to its fullest extent, you are, by default, dismantling the old power structure.
And this brings us right to the core tension of this entire story. Will this be remembered as a clean, successful military operation that took out a bad guy? Or is this just the first chapter in a new, messy, and potentially very costly American entanglement abroad? The honest answer is, that chapter hasn't been written yet.